we're joined by Emma. Emma, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hi, I'm Emma Beard, like on your face. I'm a copywriter and speaker, branding consultant from Manchester, and I met Omar on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And you work with a couple of mental health companies, doing some awesome stuff. And you've also got a very interesting story, haven't you, in terms of your own mental health? Do you mind sharing that with us a little bit, please?
Not at all. So first of all, the companies that I work with, yes, I was drawn to them because of the experience that I've had probably from before I turned 10. I've experienced mental health, mental issues for the most of my life, and I find that my passion is with helping other people, and the best way I can do that is to use my skills to help other businesses who are in the mental health space, who make it their mission to help as many people as possible. If I help them, then they can help others. So there are a couple of companies that I work with that do that. My story, the main part of my story, or I'd say the most obvious part of it, is my struggle with eating disorders, particularly anorexia. That's what I was diagnosed with 4 years ago, I think. But the story starts way before then. I think I was 19 at the time. It goes back to when I was a kid. I always felt, in retrospect, I felt like something was never quite right. I had really low mood and I couldn't explain it to anybody. I was quite snappy and very angry at the world, and I couldn't explain it. Sometimes I wouldn't have a reason for it. Through the last 10 years of therapy, I've discovered a lot about myself, and I'd say a lot of the triggers with the eating and the low self-esteem and body image came from things that were said to me when I was younger, and things that happened to me at home that made me kind of feel like I was a bit of a worthless human. At home, I was, I took things as any kid would. I took things in arguments between my parents as truth. I internalized the chaos and the words that were being thrown around, and took a lot of blame upon myself for the violence and argument that was going on. On the schoolyard, I had a lot of people commenting on my weight all the time. And if you looked at pictures of me as a kid, I was never what you would class as like a chunky kid, or a fluffy kid, as I like to call it now. When I've eaten too much chocolate at night, that's what I say. I'm getting a bit fluffy, which I'm fine with. But there was one, a family member actually, I was really, really close to, and they always used to comment on my weight. And there was 7 months between us, and I always looked up to them, and they always used to comment on my weight. So by the time I was about 11, I was looking at diets, and I was trying to diet. And at that age, anytime someone said to me that I looked like I'd lost weight, I was so proud of myself, and I was so happy, and I wanted more of it. Off the back of that, when I was 15, I decided I wanted to be a vegetarian initially because I'd seen a video in food tech that made me want to not eat meat, and I was a bit of a rebel kid, so I wanted to make life difficult for my parents as well. But as soon as I realised within the first few weeks that I was losing weight, like a lot of weight, of being a vegetarian, that was it in my mind then. I was sticking with it. Now my values are a lot more aligned. I still don't eat meat. I'm a vegan, but for all the right reasons. But for a long period, most of my teenage life, my food was all around, what I consumed was all around my weight and my body image. Things really took a turn for the worst when I finished my first year at university, and I got a huge anticlimax. I'm sure anybody who's been through uni will understand that after your first year, you've worked so hard and you've gone through so many changes, and it's time that you pack up all your stuff, leave all your friends, go back home and just sort of wait around. I, stupidly, being the sort of person I am, I constantly need to be busy. I need to have a purpose. And that summer, I just didn't get myself a job. So I started spending a lot of time at home on my own, thinking about ways that I could keep myself busy and within the first few weeks, thinking about ways to keep myself busy turned in thinking about ways to keep my body moving so I could burn more calories. Within the space of about 3 months, I dropped a couple of stone. It went from a tiny bit of dieting and sort of an I'll show you to my ex, who said some really horrible things to me at the end of our relationship, like nobody will ever love you and things like that. It went from I'll show you and doing sit-ups every day to doing as much as possible on as little food as possible. And I was driven in my mind of this whole, I will show people that I can do something. I will show people that I can make significant changes, that I can be successful. And at the time, I thought it was all about the food, but in reality, I'm a huge perfectionist. I'm what you would call a high achiever. Not to say I get really high grades or whatever, it is to say I expect so much of myself. And at the worst of it, I was doing 3 gym classes a day. I'm shocked that the gym let me in the state that I was in. One class after the other, I had aerobics, I had Zumba, and then I had a kettlebell workout, all 45 minutes each. I would go home, all of that was on an empty stomach. I would go home and eat as little as 4 broccoli florets in the whole day, and that was it. I took pride in whenever my family got takeaways in like just cooking a couple of green beans, and I would post pictures of my family's takeaway compared to my food and hashtag it as healthy and clean eating, when in reality I was damaging my body beyond belief in a way that I never would have imagined. There is so much that I can say about this issue, but that is what it is in a nutshell. That was what was on the surface. And if I'm honest, I didn't think at the time when I was doing all of this, even when I was on 4 broccoli florets a day, that there was anything wrong with me. If anything, I just thought I was in a higher mindset that everyday average people couldn't understand. They just weren't on my level. So when my parents started expressing concern, my mum, because my dad's a very quiet man and he tries not to get involved, living in a house of 5 women, it's kind of, he's careful about when he opens his mouth. It was mostly my mum, and there was a time where she came into the kitchen one evening. She was making everyone's dinner, and for the 100th time I said, don't make me anything, I'll make my own. And she stood behind me as I weighed some peas, like a bag of frozen peas, and I weighed them, and I must have had like a handful. And she asked if I was having anything else with it, and I said, no, this is my tea. And she just flipped out. She just went crazy at me. And that was kind of the everyday situation. Her crying or screaming at me screaming back. I was very defensive because I couldn't see what was wrong. And it wasn't until my dad, who never really talks about conflicts in the house, sat me down, basically just told me how it is. Told me that he didn't think I had long to live, and told me that if I wanted to do something to help the atmosphere in the house, then he wanted me to go to the doctors. And if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have gone, because for my dad to say something, it was like, whoa. And then when I went to the doctors, he told me that he didn't, in a nutshell, he didn't really think the thing was about food. He didn't think my condition, despite the fact that I was about 5 stone, and just to give you context, I'm about 10 stone now. I was half the size I am. He didn't think it was about food, and I kind of took offense to that, because I'd worked for so long to get myself down to this weight, and in my eyes nothing was going to stop me. I was really offended that he said it wasn't about food, and if anything, he believed it was about control and feeling like my life was out of control, and the only thing I could control was food. Okay. Looking back, he was completely right. At the same time as not eating, I had incredibly compulsive behaviours. Like, I would walk in and out of my bedroom 18 times before I left the house. Wow. I turned light switches on and off all the time. I had these really irrational actions that I did because I was afraid that something bad would happen. If not, and what a lot of people don't know is that eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder and perfectionism are all incredibly entwined. They're very, very common. They come as a collective. After that, I was told I needed to go to like a specialist house, an eating disorder hospital, to be assessed and basically be told whether I'd have to be taken in or not. And when I turned up, my mum drove me 40 minutes to the complete other side of Manchester. And I could see she was sort of getting teary as we approached. And I stepped out and I felt like I was in, if you've ever seen the film, I felt like I was walking into a real life Girl Interrupted.
Right, okay.
I felt like I was about to bump into Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie. It was just, I just couldn't imagine myself in there, and I felt like I didn't belong there. So it was a huge shock when the lady who runs the hospital said, "You are on death's door. Like, if you don't come in, there's a good chance you'll be sectioned or you'll just die." And for me, I think that was just a wake-up call. Although I still couldn't see it in the mirror, and it'd be 12 months until I did see it, that was the sign that, okay, something's wrong. It wasn't that I hadn't had my periods in over a year. It wasn't the fact that I had nosebleeds when I stood up. It wasn't the fact that I fainted on the street. It was the fact that somebody at such a high level, in my eyes, had recognised everything that I'd done to myself and said, okay, you're bad enough to come into hospital. At the time, I refused to go in, and I said, I'll take my chances, because I knew if I went in there and I was surrounded by people who looked like me, being the person I am, I'd turn it into a competition. And I just knew in my heart of hearts, I wouldn't get better, I'd get worse. But that was the turning point for me. It took a lot of negotiating and begging with the outpatient services to see me, because in their eyes, I was too much of a risk and they couldn't save me unless I was in. There was a really high danger that not a lot of people know this, but with eating disorder patients, a lot of them die when they're in recovery.
Okay.
Because you do so much damage to your body. For example, my kidneys were shutting down. My kidneys will never be the same again. I don't know if I'll be able to have kids because of how badly I damaged my body. My metabolism had changed. My body was eating itself from the inside out. And if you try to eat or put on weight too fast, then you're at serious risk of cardiac arrest and just having a heart attack, because your body can't cope with the food, which is why a lot of people go in, not just to receive therapy, but to be monitored and make sure they're putting on weight incredibly slowly. So that was the risk of me being out. And it took about 4 weeks of just begging the outpatient services to see me. And they gave me an ultimatum and said, you've got 4 weeks to put on so much weight. And it wasn't a lot, it was a couple of pounds. I think it was about 5 or 6 pounds. And if you can't do that, then there's a chance you'll get sectioned. And I took the challenge, and it was my baby sister that kind of spurred me on, because when you have an eating disorder, it is unfathomable. I can't put into words how difficult it is to change the habit that you're in. I would walk into shops and my mouth would, I would drool at food. I wanted the food. I wanted to eat. I'd never bring myself to buy it because there was an embarrassment of people seeing me buying food. I went through a phase of shoplifting because I just didn't want people to see me eat food. And if we had anything at home, I'd hold it and I'd stare at it. I'd just end up shaking out of frustration and throwing things away, or sometimes I'd put something in my mouth and I'd spit it out. I physically couldn't get myself to eat. And I'd say the moment of change for me was about 3 weeks into this ultimatum, and my baby sister at the time, young teenager, she'd sat me down and she just broke down. And she just said, she calls me Emzy. She said, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to leave me. And to me, I call her Boo. Boo is like my baby. So I could never let her self-soothe. When parents just let the babies cry, I would never let her self-soothe. And for her to say something like that, it was more about her. But if I have to go through pain, if I have to push through these internal barriers to make sure she feels safe and she's not left alone, then so be it. Not only that, she was kind of like my protector as well, because I remember my parents ordered a takeaway one night, and just to sort of encourage me, she said, let's go and sit in the back room on our own. And she took a pizza in, and I was sat there with my green beans still in therapy, knowing I had this ultimatum, the clock was ticking, and she just offered me a little bite. She said, I won't look. But it's like she just knew. And that was the changing point. That was when I started trying food again, like real food, albeit slowly, very small. And, you know, one bite of pizza was enough to give me an hour of conversation in my therapy lessons about all the turmoil that I went through with it. But that was the turning point. But for the last 4 years, and I know for the next 4 years, it's a constant work in progress, because there are still foods that I'm afraid of. There are still things that I can't do because of the barriers that are in my head. The best way I can describe an eating disorder, especially one as severe as mine, is it's like there's a guard in your head that's keeping you in a prison. It doesn't matter how much you want to get out. There's like 0.001% chance that you can conjure up enough strength to just get through it. In fact, it's not about chance, because I believe anybody can do it. It's just there's a tiny little shred of chance of strength that you need to find somewhere in the dark in your mind and hold on to it and just use it to get you through that first push, that first bite of normal food. And then you've got to go and find another shred of strength to get you through the next bit. There's so many things I could say. It's crazy life, horrible life to live.
No, well, thank you for sharing that. There's so many things that I've actually just learned just through this one chat. It seems that you were in a lucky situation that you had a family around you and your dad to have that conversation, and you had that empathy and that compassion at home, even though, you know, there were arguments, but there are people who did care for you, who did make those initial steps to get you there. It was a journey just to get you to admit that there was a problem. How long did that take you from that conversation with your dad to eating that pizza with your baby sister? I mean, what sort of time frame is that?
Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks. It was one thing, people acknowledging to me that I had issue. I think I had several attempts to eat, but like I said, as soon as I put something in my mouth, I just spat it out. I couldn't handle the guilt, even on my own. It was like the guilt. It's like this guard is watching you in your head, and I just couldn't cope. I had this thing. I looked at life through a different lens. I looked at life through everything that came into my mouth. I imagined it spreading to parts of my body and just putting weight on like that and giving me spots. And so yeah, it was about 8 weeks before I did that, and that wasn't like a process that sped up either. It was still like just, I think, half a piece of pizza, but that was more than what I'd eaten for like the last 2 months, which was just like broccoli every day. I got to a point where I wouldn't even eat frozen peas because they had sugar in them.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What advice do you have as this, with what I'm learning at the moment, is that it's very noticeable when somebody has potentially got a eating disorder because of the weight loss, and it'll be their friends and it'll be their family who'll notice. What advice would you give to friends and family who are worried about someone? Because it seems it'd be so difficult, because until that person accepts there's a problem, it doesn't matter what people will say. But is there anything that you can say to help people like that? Or is it just a case of just stay there until there's a breakthrough? What advice do you have?
Well, there's 2 things that I'd say. The first one is, believe it or not, a lot of eating disorders aren't visible.
Okay.
When people don't imagine that weight loss can happen overnight. For me, it did, but the eating disorder was 18 months in the making.
Right.
Minimum. The weight loss was actually over like a 6-week period, and then it just got worse and worse and worse. But it was about 18 months in the making, and I think it's important to say that after the initial 12 months of intense therapy and me putting on weight, I then relapsed and went into full-blown bulimia. And when you're bulimic, you're probably at a higher chance of getting cardiac arrest at any moment. But a lot of bulimics actually put on weight. I did.
Okay.
But the strain that you're putting on your heart and the amount of food you're consuming, your stomach is at risk of bursting, and your heart is at risk of, stopping or going into cardiac arrest. So that's one thing. But for anybody who's worried about somebody close to them who's struggling with an eating disorder, I don't know if I am qualified to give one piece of advice. I would say the thing that helped me was the person I cared most about coming to me, not from a place of, not with an attitude of, you need to do this, this is the problem. It was if you're not going to do this for yourself, do it for me. I'm worried about you. But a lot of people who struggle with eating disorders simply want recognition. It sounds bad, but they just want recognition. For me, it took me, I didn't believe that I had a problem until somebody in an eating disorder hospital said to me, you have a problem. And I didn't find the strength to try and make a change until the person that means the most to me in the world asked me to do it for her. I think arguing with people, I can't blame my mum for the way that she handled the situation, but I definitely responded a lot better to my dad sitting me down and having a calm, collected conversation with me. And again, it was a similar sort of rhetoric. It was, just do it for us, because we can't live in a house with this kind of atmosphere. Just go to the doctors and see what they say, and we'll take it from there. So he framed it with, do it for us and just take that little step. It wasn't put on weight, stop doing what you're doing, which is what my mum was saying. It was, I understand you might be going through a bit of struggle, do this for us, and it's just one small step. All he asked of me was to go to the doctors and see what was up. And then from the doctors gave me another small step. And that's kind of how I've taken my whole life since, with tiny little incremental steps. Because asking somebody with an eating disorder to suddenly change what they're doing, whether it's hurting you or not, is not going to work. It's impossible in their minds. For me, I would have much rather have been, I used to say I'd rather be fat and happy than skinny and miserable, but I cannot make this change until I looked at it in tiny little steps. So that's the advice. Come at it from a place of like calmness, understanding, and ask them to do it for you. If they can't find the strength to do it for themselves, just ask them to do one small thing. Perhaps not change an eating habit, but to just go to the doctors.
Yeah, I think that's very poignant what you just said, that compassion, empathy, understanding, asking, that's what helped you to make those first steps, and that is baby steps. I suppose it's like mental health, and I've talked about my mental health quite a bit, that it is baby steps, but the first step is realizing that you need to see help, or you need to see someone about it. It's just great to hear that you had a family to support you and to help you. And it must be, I mean, I've just learned now that I thought it would be obvious if somebody had an eating disorder because they would just look incredibly frail. But, you're saying that, most eating disorders you can't tell. So that's something that I've learned, and that's the psychological side of it as well. So how's your road to recovery been then?
Very, very up and down.
Okay.
It's very like, I work with two guys who they call themselves addicts in recovery. They don't call themselves ex-addicts because it's a constant work in progress. Like I said, pretty much out of the gates of my first round of intensive therapy for 12 months, I developed bulimia because I couldn't handle the guilt of all this weight I put on. the first bit of therapy that I got, we only had enough time to sort of get me to a healthy weight and be able to cope with the day to day. The next round was all about accepting me for who I am. And I believe that the issues that were going on with me deep down, they could have manifested in any number of ways. It just so happens that it was an eating disorder that sort of was the one way it manifested. So it's not a surprise to me that the first round of therapy, which focused solely on the eating disorder, didn't get rid of all of my problems. The only way I knew how to cope with it was, again, to control my food. But this time I did it by hurting myself in a different way, and that was bulimia. That did take me another 12 months to sort of get over. I went back to therapy, but that was about an 18-week wait, and between realizing that I had another problem to getting seen was just a whole downward spiral, and it was horrendous. Again, I never thought I'd get back to that point, but I did. Only this time I was actually like quite chubby. I was bigger than I am now, but I was throwing up every single day. From then, most of my issues have pretty much just been mental. I stuck with my therapy, the second round of therapy, for 24 months because I begged and pleaded for them to just keep me on because I didn't want to relapse again. And it's been just a constant work in progress, self-help, being honest with people around me. One of the most embarrassing things I had to do, was something I knew I had to do, was go to someone really close to me whenever I'd had a binge and tell them I want to make myself sick, just distract me. And it was the hardest thing to do because it was embarrassing for me. I was so embarrassed, but with their support and their help and them talking me out of it and saying, no, it's wrong, it's going to damage your body, I managed to get through it. And eventually it was more about appreciating what my body can do for me, all the things I want to do to help other people, where I want to go with my career, that really drove me to just override that. But it has been a constant work in progress. It's really not been easy. In times like this, the lockdown, it puts me back into that summer where I kind of had nothing to do, but I've learned so much from that now I'm just throwing myself into writing and painting and talking to people all the time, and also taking time to actively look after myself, because I'm also aware that keeping busy is just avoiding the stuff that's going on. So I take time to journal, and sometimes I don't want to. I really don't want to, but I think I've been through the ringer that many times. I just don't want to go back to that place. So I do the thing that's tough in the short term, but I know where it's taking me further away from in the long term, and that's that horrible dark place that I've already been to twice.
Yeah, and it's interesting with what you're saying as well about the time that we're living in now, and that you realise that we have to understand our metaphorical and proverbial DNA. We need to understand ourselves and how we act, and to be able to say, right, we're in lockdown now, I need to make sure that I'm protecting myself. There's a lot of people at the moment who are just scared to have that conversation with themselves. And it's interesting as well what you say about trying to keep busy as well, so you avoid the situation. There's so many people trying to do that at the moment. So you have been painting as well. We were speaking about that before the call, and journaling as well. How therapeutic do you find journaling and painting them?
Amazing. So before I picked up the paintbrush yesterday, I was beating myself up the whole day because I didn't go for a run, and I my energy was focused on trying to not let the demon in me take over and beat me up and tell me that I'm a bad person or I'm worthless. So a lot of my energy was put into that until I surrendered and said, okay, I'm not going to write because my brain's too foggy. I'm just going to try and do something that I used to do when I was really young. And it really helped me. So now I know that works. I'm going to use it a lot more. In terms of the journaling, like I said, sometimes I just cannot be bothered. But I do it anyway because it gives you that objectivity. So it's like going to therapy, but you don't actually have to expose your secrets to anybody else. You can literally just write what's in your brain, and there's something, it alleviates everything. It takes it all out of your head. So at the moment, I've got thoughts like ping, 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 all in my brain. And as soon as I put them onto paper, I've not, it's not like I've pushed them to the back of my brain. I've just put them out there. They're there. I can leave them, and I forget about them, and it just helps so much.
Yeah, it takes that weight off your shoulder in a way. I was saying to
Massively.
someone else who we were talking about an argument that they were having with a friend, and I said, just write everything down. You don't have to send it to them, but at least if you write it down, you're getting all your thoughts out, and you know what you can say and what you can't say and what might hurt them. But it's more for yourself, isn't it, when you write, not for anyone else. So you're not doing it for other people to read or to publish it. You're doing it to get those thoughts out of your head and to be able to articulate what's actually going on in your head. It's funny you should actually, we're talking about journals. Since lockdown, I've been looking through some of my old journals, and I actually found a journal from when I thought I was going to be a stand-up comedian. And honestly, oh my God, some of the jokes. You know, there's jokes that you think that you might have made up, but you realise no. A, they're really bad, and B, if they did, somebody's already said it. I found this, like anecdotes and jokes. And what was the one which was literally like I was saying dad jokes before, you know, it was even like, you know, it was even popular. What's the difference between Dubai and Abu Dhabi? Dubai like the Flintstones, but Abu Dhabi do.
It did take a second, but I get it.
I mean, what the fuck? What the fuck?
I'm not. No, Omar, you would have an audience in me, because that is a typical dad joke, and I live for dad jokes.
Well,
I live for them.
Well, I've actually got a book full of them right over here, so
Send it to me in the post.
Yeah, but that's cool. But so how have you found it now then? So one thing that we've spoken about, which I think is really critical, is that both of us are not experts, but we don't want to give advice, but we want to give our shared experience within our situations and our mental health journeys. How do you find it with people connecting with you and talking about their journeys? Do you have a lot of people doing that? Because you're very relatable, but do you have a lot of people trying to reach out to you?
Yeah, I get quite a few. And I do, when I post my videos on Instagram, I do tend to sign them off with, if you need somebody to talk to, come and speak to me. But as I said before we started recording, that is purely from, at the moment, because we're in a lockdown, that's from a companionship, kind of having a pen pal. If you've got nobody else to speak to, because I'm so honest and open, and I do just let everything, you know, my heart is open, everything's on my sleeve. I don't hold back. I think it's a lot easier for people who don't normally talk about any kind of struggles to just drop me a message. And sometimes it's not as serious as I'm struggling with depression, I haven't got out of bed for 3 days. Sometimes it is just, I'm really struggling with this lockdown, like, or I really enjoyed the videos of your guinea pigs. I was so upset the other day. They cheered me up. But I do get a few messages, like I got messages of somebody a few weeks ago who was just really, really at rock bottom. And I kind of, it's hard because, like you said, I don't want to give advice. And I do have to, I'm trying to constantly find a nice way to say, I'm not a therapist. I don't want you to take my advice as, you know, as what's it called, like as law. I don't want you to take it as that, but just listen out for my experience. So the way I usually respond to messages like that, like I'm struggling with depression, I don't want to be here anymore, what do I do? I normally start with, okay, I've been in that position, I have felt like that. If I have, if not, then it will normally be, I've never felt like that. Have you reached out to somebody close to you? I always mention the doctors and how sometimes it's not nice, and sometimes you don't find the right therapist first time round, but it's absolutely critical that somebody knows and that you're talking to somebody close to you. But then I'll give them advice on things that I do. For example, with the small steps thing, there was one person who messaged me and told me that she hadn't got out of bed for 3 days. And it was just because she couldn't motivate herself. So I said to her, whenever I'm struggling with something that feels like a massive mountain, this is what I do. And it's back to basics, something really simple and easy to do. There's a reason that binge eating chocolate late at night is such a common habit. It's because it's easy. So I try and get people like that to break down the whole, you know, if they're in a really bad place, I think they feel the pressure to just be in a perfect place, seek advice that can get them to that great place. Whereas I normally say, well, wind it back a little bit. You're not going to get there unless you can take the first step. So why don't you try this? And in the meantime, while you're trying that, let me know how you get on. But also, if you've not spoken to somebody close to you, like your mum, your dad, or your siblings, or a doctor, then try and do that as well. Just let me know how you get on. And most of the time, like, they will come back to me and tell me that things have gotten better. And a lot of the time it's like having an accountability buddy. Like, they did it, but then they don't message me again after, not with a problem anyway, after the first message usually, because I give them something for them to try on their own. And it does always include like speaking to someone close to you, because that's the thing that helped me.
Okay, brilliant. So accountability is a big thing. Definitely for you, it was that accountability with having to say something to your friend and that embarrassment that really sort of helped with your personal journey. But it's right, what works for you won't necessarily work for someone else. It's just difficult, isn't it? Because mental health is not something which is fixed overnight or in a year's time, and it's an ongoing battle. Are there any resources that you could recommend to people, whether it be online, or are there any books that you've read which have really helped you?
Absolutely. There's one by Professor Stephen Peters.
Right.
I think it's called The Chimp Paradox.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's a bestseller on Amazon. I think you've probably got it. It's in that library. If you don't have it, I'll be very disappointed. It's a phenomenal book that helped me. There you go. It helped me through therapy, and I've recommended it to so many of my friends. I'm not lying. Everybody's gone and bought it, and they've all come back with good reviews. It's phenomenal. Another one. Do you want me to take you to my library?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do
library.
Yeah.
Real quick. I'll take you to my library. I'll give you a tour of my house very quickly. So we were talking about my bookshelf earlier, weren't we? So these are the books that I've read up top. Give you a good view of these books.
Okay.
That one's The Chimp Paradox. That's a brilliant one.
Yeah.
Power of Habit. That is a fantastic book.
Right.
And The Power of Habit. There's also The Power of Now by a guy called Eckhart Tolle. I think that's how you say his name. Those 3 books have been life-changing for me. The Power of Habit one especially, because that's where I got the idea from. There's a reason so many bad habits exist and are so common amongst us, because they're usually really easy. So the only way to develop a good habit is to make it really easy for yourself. So yeah, the Chimp Paradox, The Power of Habit, and The Power of Now.
Fantastic. I haven't read The Power of Now for a while. I'm going to have to reread that. That Chimp Paradox one, that's a great book, though. It's a great book.
Brilliant book. And a podcast as well. When I'm at the gym, instead of listening to music, I listen to The School of Greatness by Lewis Howes. That's for entrepreneurial people. And I like that podcast because it's not all go, 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 do everything 110%. The host, Lewis Howes, gets loads of different people in. And it's normally people who've made a huge name for themselves in business, but he talks about the struggles and the issues they've been through and about how they overcame them and how they conquered those issues. And I just love that.
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting with like events as well. I'm more interested in the events and the stories where people talk about the mistakes and the struggles rather than the successes, because I think that's a lot more relatable, especially with mental health and, you know, running your own business. It's more about how they overcome. So, you know, it's interesting you said that. So those 3 books, that podcast, anything else that you could recommend? Anything else?
Two things. Exercise, and before anybody scoffs, if you're a couch potato like I was a few years ago, hear me out. Again, it's about small steps. So if you're not somebody who's ever gone for a run or ever joined a gym, the way I started it, because I was not always the fitness buff that I am, I started by just going out for a walk and not expecting a lot of myself. I avoided looking at fitness accounts because they kind of tempted me to hold myself to higher standards than I was physically capable of doing. So I started off walking, and then I turned to hiking. Then I got into cycling and swimming, and then I got to running. And I was the kid in school that hid in the showers when PE was on. So if I can do it, I honestly believe everyone can. The key is to just take small steps and not make yourself feel like you need to do a lot. So exercise outdoors is absolutely essential to my mental health, and there's a reason so many people encourage it. But I'm careful of the fact that it can be hard for somebody who doesn't exercise a lot to look at someone like me in my running gear, which is when I do a lot of my videos, and just feel bad about themselves. And that's why I preach about taking the small steps. And I also share when I can only run 3k when I'm used to running 10. You know, I do have those days. So exercise is one, and the other one is have a feel-good playlist to start your morning with. That just, even if you're I've got a music background. I used to study music. That was what I attempted my first degree in before it got poorly. I had to drop out because of my illness. But music it does have a profound impact on your emotions, and I think a lot of us turn to sad music like Adele or something when we're really, really low, because it resonates with our feelings. It makes us feel understood. But turning to a playlist full of the genres of music and the artists that you love that are a little more upbeat, they can shift your mood like you wouldn't believe. For me, it's, a lot of people won't believe, it's reggae dancehall, Afro beats, Latina music, all things like that just really help to switch my mood.
Okay, amazing. Cool. Sorry, I've just got my FaceTime popping up, so I was like, go away.
It's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So thank you. There's a lot that we can take away from this. So you were helped by your family being empathetic, understanding, caring, and asking. It was it was a journey. It's incremental steps. You will fall off the bandwagon, but keep going, and accountability. If you can give somebody who will be accountable, and you yourself are accountable, that will help. But this is your story, and this is what's worked for you. Any closing thoughts? Or anything that you'd like to say? Any little snippets of wisdom?
Yeah, it's something that I tell myself every day, and I don't always believe it, but I'll never stop telling myself because I know how important it is. And I tell it myself in the hope that one day I'll get there to believe in it without any doubt, and that is, you are enough. You are absolutely enough. You are enough without comparing yourself to other people, because that's where a lot of the issues stem from. And a lot of mental health issues, I believe, from my own experience, because I've always struggled with depression as well, starts with feeling like you're not good enough and comparing yourself to other people. So just remind yourself every day that you are enough. You might not believe it, but one day you will. If you just keep that in your mind, you are enough. There's nothing to say that you aren't. You weren't born more unequal to anybody else. Nobody was born better than you. There is nothing you could have done to make you less worthy of the life that you deserve.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Emma. And where can people find more about your guinea pigs and your running?
The guinea pigs, serious. If you don't want to follow me for mental health or fitness, follow me for them, because they bring so much joy to me and my following. My Instagram handle is EmmaXBeard, spelled BEARD, like on your face. All one word, EmmaXBeard. That's me on Instagram. Brilliant. Thank you very much for this. I've learned so much from you, Emma. And
we will speak soon, no doubt.
Thank you for the platform. Honestly, what you're doing is amazing.
Cool, thank you. Peace.